When we're talking cross-cultural leadership, I want to be careful in looking at biblical models of leadership. Because often we point to Jesus immediately, good. We point to Nehemiah immediately, good. We point to Paul immediately, good. We less often point to a Barnabas or a Timothy or a Deborah or people like that. And the Bible presents us more than one model of what a good leader should look like. And we tend to make an assumption that we have the right verses and the right person in mind when we think of what, for example, the term servant leader would be. Dwayne Elmer wrote a very good book called Cross-Cultural Servanthood. And I resonate deeply when he said in the book he didn't like the term servant leader because he's seen too many people declare themselves to be servant leaders as they boss others around. And the point is not be a servant leader because we can focus on the word leader, but be a focus on the servant part. What does that mean to serve others? And again, that can also be culturally mediated. How did Barnabas serve? Well, remember, he went to Antioch. He went and got Paul and brought him to Antioch. So this is a guy that introduced Paul into a new church setting, which was a very strong multicultural church. You look at the name of the representatives in the church in Antioch, and they were a multicultural church. Barnabas set Paul's feet on the right path, and then they went together on the first missionary journey, and a man by the name of John Mark joined them. And then John Mark deserted them in the middle of the journey. So when Paul asked Barnabas to go on the second journey, Barnabas wanted to bring John Mark with him, and Paul did not. And they got into such a big fight over it that they split. And from that point on, the book of Acts is following the life of Paul, and it's not following Barnabas anymore. Why did Barnabas fight so hard over John Mark? He was his cousin. You read in a later epistle. So this was a family issue that was coming up. We choose Paul as the leader that we look at rather than Barnabas as the leader. And Paul is our hero, but Barnabas was a son of encouragement. He's less of a hero. Is the Bible portraying him as an evil person? No. As a person who had certain priorities that didn't fit Paul's priorities, and Luke chose to follow Paul? Absolutely. So I don't want to toss out Paul as a good paradigm of leadership, but I want to say sometimes we need to go into the Bible and look for different models rather than one that fits our worldview the best. And so I'd say the Bible offers us wisdom, but we don't always have the right lenses on to see it. A lot in the Bible is written from a perspective of honor, what Asians would call face. And you don't want to lose face, and you want to give face to others. You don't want your group to lose face. As an individual, you want to gain face, but if the individual loses face, his entire group or her entire group loses face. There's a lot of that going on in the Scriptures in Jesus' confrontation with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And eventually, he made them lose so much face, and he needed to, that they chose to kill him. We don't see that as an honor game. We just see it as those evil Pharisees. And I agree with that. They were evil. There's no qualms about that. But when you understand the role honor plays in that, it can unlock certain doors into better understanding the New Testament that I don't understand from my own natural vantage point because it's something that's off my radar. And so the Bible does offer us wisdom, but we need to go into it. I mentioned a team of a German, a Swede, an American, a Korean. The best way for that team to do and develop theological understanding is to do it together. Because the German will say to the American, you're just reading that like an American will. The Swede will say to the Korean, that's a new insight I hadn't gained before, because you as a Korean are looking at the text differently than I do. And it doesn't mean there's only one person who's always got it right, but it does mean each of us bring insights to the Scriptures that help us gain a better understanding together of what the Scriptures mean. And that's when I posture this idea that the Bible brings us wisdom in multicultural teams. The Bible is loaded with cross-cultural conflict. It's loaded with ideals of how to handle that. We tend to find a few passages and stick with those rather than looking at the full text. And not just looking at the full text, but seeing the text through the eyes of a Korean instead of the eyes of an American. And realizing that the Korean brings insight to the text based on Greek exegesis, so not just based on culture, that I wouldn't have based on my own understanding of Greek exegesis, because the Korean will read it differently than I do. And together we can come to a common agreement. This is what the passage really means. And it's more likely to be accurate than when it's just the American or just the Korean doing that.